Yeah, I'm just looking at a while ago.
Good evening and welcome to the Lopatcong Township Planning Board meeting of October 2022. At this time, I'm required, I would invite you to join us in a silent moment of prayer, followed immediately by the oath of allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'm required to state that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975 by advertising a notice in the Star Ledger and the Express Times and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Beth, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, members Clymer.
Here.
Boyle.
Here.
DeLeo. Polito.
Here.
Sazanaw.
Here.
Weeks.
Here.
Mayor Mangucci. Vice Chairman Sampson. Chairman Denver.
Here. Okay, from there we'll proceed to unfinished business. Has everyone received a copy of the minutes of the August 24th and September 28th, 2022 minutes?
Yes.
Are there any questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve both those minutes. Oh, you have, I'm sorry.
Sorry, the only comment I had was, at some point there were members written instead of the members' names. In terms of some of the questions throughout. I don't know if that would be rectified later for the record or, I believe it was September 28th, within the transcript. There was just member instead of,
Oh, I didn't put their name?
at some.
Oh, all right, I can go back and take a look at that. and
Yeah,
fill that
sorry.
in.
Thanks.
Was that the minutes that was, the transcription that was taken that evening?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
Because I noticed
If
that
it's
too.
the
but
formal transcript, then I can't, I'm not gonna
that-
mess with
That's
that.
what I'm saying. I thought it was
Yeah, if
the
it was my
transcript.
minutes, that's fine.
And the court reporter just said
Yeah, the
member
court
of the planning
reported
board
that
as
one.
opposed to
This is right here.
identifying who
Oh,
it
that's
was.
what, okay,
So I don't know if it's even possible to go back and do that.
okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
any further comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion.
Wait here a second. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any noes? Any abstentions? Minutes will stand as published then. Okay, we'll move on right on to business. We have both Bridge Development Partners and Advanter Performance Materials. Are both applicants here this evening?
Bridge.
You're from Bridge.
Yes, sir.
And you're from Advanter. All right, we'll proceed with the Bridge Development Partners LLC, Block 99, Lot 6, Strikers Road Warehouse Complex. This is the final hearing.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bob Smith. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of New Jersey, and I'm here tonight representing Bridge Development Partners. As you know, this is an application for a logistics center. Received preliminary major site plan approval and variance relief on November the 29th of 2021. Almost a year later, and we're back to get final site plan approval. There have been some relatively minor tweaks to the plan generally at the recommendations of your professionals. In order to go forward tonight, our first requirement is a completeness determination. There are 4 waivers being requested, so that we can be deemed complete. Checklist item 38, layout of all parking spaces within 100 feet of off-site, existing and proposed. Checklist item 39, layout of existing and proposed off-site loading, showing dimension and locations. Checklist item 58, complete list of site improvements by item and the quantities of each to be constructed. And checklist item 62, presence of wetlands and compliance with applicable NJDEP regulations. I'd ask that you allow me to call to give you a little testimony on these checklist items. Our engineer, Mr. Brett Skapinitz, I'd ask that he come forward and be sworn so that he can give testimony.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give the board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name, spell your last for the record.
Sure. First name Brett, last name Skapinetz, Skapinetz.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Skapinitz, for the record, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Dynamic Engineering Consultants in Chester, New Jersey, where I'm a director.
Okay, and you have been the project engineer on this project?
I have.
So you're thoroughly familiar with it?
Very much so, yes.
Why is it appropriate for the planning board to grant the requested waivers?
If we look at them, 38 and 39, I'm going to group together. They're related to the existing and proposed parking surrounding and loading surrounding the site. And that is visible in the aerial photo that we have. We're not impacting any of those spaces in any way. So we're looking just a full waiver with respect to those two items, because generally speaking, the information in the aerial shows what's surrounding us. When it comes to 58 and 62, I'll call those temporary waivers we're requesting. 58, in that we do intend to, should the board grant approval, we understand that an estimate is required for the proposed improvements, and we would provide that for the purposes of bonding. And then 62 is related to the fact that from wetlands and compliance with DEP. We have filed for the letter of interpretation with DEP. We're just waiting for it to come through. And we anticipate that in coming months.
You're quiet, I'm sorry. Quiet.
So, Chairman, Mr. Skapinitz is available to the board for questions if there are any.
All right, all four of those items you mentioned, we had extensive discussion on in the preliminary hearing coming up. And I think we agreed just about all of those during that performance. So
We did.
as long as you agree to make that a condition of the approval,
We have no problem with that, Mr. Chairman.
let me just check with my professionals. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
George, no problem?
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're quite welcome.
motion to deem it complete.
Okay. As far as we had that discussion, we've already been through it. I entertain a motion to deem it complete. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that.
Do I hear a second?
Yeah, I second.
Beth, make a roll call, please.
Yes. Members Clymer,
Yes.
Coyle,
Yes.
Toledo,
Yes.
Kazanoff,
Yes.
Weeks,
Yes.
Chairman Devlin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Quite welcome.
So going forward with the final approval, and in the context of the two reports that we received Ruggiero Land Designs LLC, dated October 24th, 2022. We also received Collier's Engineering, dated October 25th, 2022. With your indulgence, I'm going to ask Mr. Skapinitz to give us an overview on those reports, if you would, Mr. Skapinitz.
Sure. Before I do that, just give just a quick overview, just add-ons to what Mr. Smith noted. With respect to the plan changes, if we recall from preliminary, a couple just the higher level changes that were made. Main thing was stormwater management was adjusted primarily to adhere to new stormwater rules that were put in effect last year. That included just reconfiguration of basins, both open basins as well as some underground water quality basins that were placed within the parking and loading areas of the site. And that's shown in the plans. Another item was related to Highlands. There was discussion about the prime recharge area that's located on the called the southern end of the site, closer to the river. There was discussion about that before the board about how much we were disturbing. We went back, reviewed it with Highlands, provided more detailed area of that prime recharge area, and clearly showed how we're falling underneath the allowable 15% disturbance. We're at 10% right now. Another main topic was sanitary sewer. If you recall, we were discussing about capacity in between the preliminary granting of preliminary and now. We've run through the calculations, received a sign off from Lopatcong Township on our TWA application. That is now sitting with Phillipsburg. It's been reviewed. We're just waiting. We're basically just going through the formality of some developer agreement paperwork with them to get their sign off and then submit it to the DEP. Highlands, as I just mentioned, I did talk about the prime recharge area, and we have made our resubmission to them. We did communicate with them as of yesterday. They were waiting for Collier's report, primarily with regards to their comments on stormwater management, before they were going to make a reply. We don't have a formal answer from them now, but I will say that from a stormwater management standpoint, as you noted in Adam's letter, that they feel we're in conformance with respect to the stormwater management ordinance in town, as well as DEP, that it follows with our new design. And hopefully, we're hopeful that Highlands feels the same way, along with the meeting of the prime recharge area. Lastly, just wanted to note that we obviously resubmitted to other agencies. As I just mentioned, we did make the submission to DEP for a letter of interpretation, though we're expecting there's no impact. We expect any wetlands or wetland buffers. And then we've also made our resubmissions to the county and soil conservation. The only one we got back to us is soil conservation, which they had some comments with regards to stabilizing the basins during construction, which we'll take care of in a resubmission to them. So generally speaking, if you look at it preliminary versus final, other than the changes to the basins, that's the main thing you'll see. One other point to note is that if you look, there's some additional trees that we're adding to the plan. About 30 more trees, evergreen trees were added. They were also increased in height from 7 to 8 feet to 8 to 10 feet. And the berm in the back, if you notice, if you recall in the preliminary plan, there were a couple berms that were added. As we're doing soil movement, we're going to create the berms to provide additional screening to the residents to the rear or to the east of the site. One of the berms, the one closest to the building, was raised by about 3 feet based on our reconfiguration of the soil calculations. So in adding in the additional soil, raised it up, and essentially those, between the landscaping and the basins, those would be the main things you would see as far as changes in the plan.
Have you had an opportunity to review the planner's report dated October the 24th, 2022?
We have, yes.
Is there anything in that report with which we disagree?
No, there is not.
All right, and the requests, not to characterize them, but they are relatively minor requests, and we will agree to conform to those requests, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Have you had an opportunity to review the Collier's engineering report dated October 25th, 2022?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and similarly, we thought the comments were exceptionally reasonable. Do we disagree with any of them?
No, and though there was some testimony to be requested, which I just touched on, main one being Highlands and our status with them, which I just went through, and I think that was primarily it, unless there's anything else that professionals wanted me to run through.
So, Mr. Chairman, we're in total agreement. We've done, I think, everything that the professionals wanted us to do. They have some tweaks that they want, and we're happy to do them. And that, unless there's questions, that concludes their case for the final.
Just for the record, just to clarify in my letter, we indicated that and they have agreed, the applicant to supply the electrical facilities for electrical vehicles on the site. I had listed in my report 20 spaces they have to provide. The number is actually 16. So just for the record, it should be 16.
I think that's becoming a state requirement now.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
I put the wrong number in the report. I had 20 listed, it should be 16.
State statute now.
Yes, no, understood.
And you agree to conform?
Absolutely. We only obey the law. That's one of our primary principles.
George?
Yes, no, that's it, everything's fine.
Adam, do you have any?
Sure, yeah, I could just speak to some of the comments that we had. As Mr. Skapinitz indicated, the primary revisions here were to make the site compliant with the current stormwater rules, statewide and township stormwater ordinance and the statewide stormwater rules. So that was achieved with the revisions to the plan. There is one question outstanding, and not to get into the weeds with the Highlands, but they are sort of questioning some of the, trying to not qualify, but explain this correctly. I guess the conclusions of the ability of the site to recharge groundwater. As most of the board members likely know, Lopatcong is famous for sinkhole activity. So in general, as we've seen in many recent developments, residential, commercial, warehouse, any type of development, we don't typically recommend that groundwater recharge be practiced on site developments. Understanding that that's the case, we will work with the Highlands to kind of explain that situation and understand what their feeling is in terms of how their requirements can be addressed on the site to kind of meet the spirit of what they're looking to achieve, as well as make sure that sites that are developed are safe and don't pose a threat to users of properties and or public.
So Chairman, if I can, this is something I'm doing this a long time. I look very young, but I'm doing it a long time. In this application, I learned a new word, and the word is karst. And you, in Lopat, one of your blessings or curses is that you have a lot of karst, which is limestone, a form of limestone. And the problem with groundwater recharge is what happens to the karst.
It's too much water, it turns into sinkholes.
Right.
Is the primary issue.
Right. So we're going to work together with Highlands and Mr. Wisniewski to have the appropriate solution.
So that'll be an ongoing discussion prior to construction commencing on the site.
We get a conditional approval.
Right, exactly. Work with the Highlands, and Mr. Skapinitz already spoke to that, but I just want to indicate that. And our geotechnical department or group at our firm reviewed the report, and they're sort of they've reviewed it and they're in agreement with the conclusions of the geotechnical consultant for the developer, indicating that groundwater recharge is not recommended on the site, and the site generally has poor infiltration based on the existing soils on the site.
Well aware of that.
And
So that's all I
the
have.
lower area down by Bend is definitely an area that you should watch out for.
Mhm.
All right, it's been there, it's happened there.
Mhm.
Just giving you a heads
In
up.
the township basin, right? Had sinkholes?
Yeah, before, in the town basin, that one also, but up above the house.
Mhm.
All right, we kind of, fill in some of the things. So,
Okay.
all right, that area would be very careful with.
Okay.
That's all I have.
I have nothing, Chairman.
Any board members have any questions?
I have a couple of questions. Is there a plan B, or is it something necessary at this point, but it's just an ongoing?
To address sinkholes?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so the
the
recommendation,
elevation is such already that it's quite slow to generally put a structure onto it. I mean,
yeah, the site's going to be regraded significantly to
Right.
accommodate the building. Also, the recommendation is always, in the township, it's sort of a rule that every stormwater facility is lined to prevent water infiltration into the ground so that sinkholes don't form. So that's already on the plans, that's built into the design. So that's the plan to address the potential for sinkhole
Yeah.
activity.
he's, when exactly did you reach out to the NJDEP about? You said there was a letter out recently?
It was for the letter of interpretation application on the wetlands.
Right, when was that?
It was filed a couple months ago, and then we're already been in communication with them, our wetlands consultant, and I think they're planning a meeting on site next month.
Henceforth, since the letter, you have had communications since then?
There's been, yes,
Okay.
yes.
And next month?
That's my understanding. Yeah, I don't think a formal date has been scheduled, but the communication's been to try and plan for it next month.
Okay.
just to clarify, Mr. Sazano, just to elaborate on that, the letter of interpretation is a document that you file with the NJDEP to identify and determine where wetlands exist on the site and whether any regulations apply to those areas on the site and/or whether they will be disturbed during construction. And I believe in this case, likely they won't be disturbed. But the DEP files a letter of interpretation and they interpret yes or no.
Right.
And these are the standards that apply to those areas to be disturbed.
And I just add just a little bit more color to it. Those wetlands were flagged by our wetlands consultant. That's done first and it's surveyed. So if you look at our plans and our
Right.
survey, those wetland lines is there and you'll see that it's predominantly off-site because it's associated with the river, which is off-site. It's in county land off our southern end. So tacking on the buffer to it, that buffer extends basically just to our property line, generally speaking. It's not impacted by any of the proposed grading or other work that we're doing on the
You
site.
mean creek when you say river, right?
Yeah, Lopatcong
The
Creek.
creek, Lopatcong Creek, yes.
No, I mean, it does rush at times, but I just wanted to clarify. Thank you. That's great, thanks.
Okay.
Further discussion? Okay, so entertain a motion.
Open it for public questions and then public comment.
Okay. I'll open this to the public for questioning on the testimony that the engineer has just given. Yes, ma'am.
Judy Liptak, 47 Kyle Drive. Can I make a statement first that the microphones are not working properly?
No.
Oh,
You can ask-
well,
You can ask.
as a person who's handicapped, I'm finding it very difficult to hear in here. I'm deaf on one side. So I'm asking just to hear, there's no sewer approval yet from Phillipsburg?
But the
Is there a letter?
The TWA application has been signed off by Lopatcong Township. The
Correct.
application is in with Phillipsburg,
Correct?
and there are essentially developer agreement documents that are underway in the process of being completed. And then we expect, once that's done, that those agreements are taken care of, we expect the TWA application to be signed, and then we will submit to the DEP for their review.
So the answer is no.
It's not officially been signed off by Phillipsburg.
That was the question. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public hearing portion on this.
You can see if anybody wants to make a statement.
This is for questioning on the hearing. We can do that at the end of the program.
On this application, you have to state on the record.
I'm informed that legally I have to allow a statement now to be made if this is the end of the application. Seeing and
Yes.
hearing none, we'll close that portion.
I'm just going to have you raise your right hand.
Sure,
Swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
I know who you are, but please state your name and
Sure.
state your last for the record.
Yeah, Donna Schneider, SCHNEIDER, 26 Meadowview. My statement is as such. I'm not understanding back there. Am I making a statement to them or to you?
You're just giving testimony.
I'm just giving testimony. Okay. Can I ask a question of Bridge? It's not about the testimony that I've heard tonight, but you're asking for statements, so.
Just make your statement.
Okay. Your property on 22, the Bridge Point development, is that fully occupied?
This is beyond this.
Can I introduce Mr. John Porsick, who's a principal of Bridge. If you'd like to have him sworn, we're happy to do it.
It is a little bit beyond what this application is for. If the applicant wants to entertain that, it's up to you,
Okay,
Mr.
that's
Smith.
fine. That's fine if you don't want to do that. That's fine.
We're happy to answer the question.
Okay, I
I'll
don't
just
know
swear you
whether
in
it
just
is
so
or not.
that you can answer the question. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last for the record.
John Porsick, spelled Porcek.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, so the building off of 22X in Lopatcong is fully occupied, and we're also building buildings in Phillipsburg. The
Yes.
last building's under construction right now, that is not yet occupied. It'll probably be occupied in the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay, so every building that you've built is completely occupied?
Other, as I just mentioned, the
Other
last
than that
building's
one.
under construction, it will be occupied once it's finished. but it's
Okay.
under construction.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public portion of the statements. Move on to- Okay, at this point, ask for a motion to approve with all of the stated conditions in both professionals' reports. The applicants agreed to conform with all of those situations. So I would entertain a motion to approve the application. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Do I hear a second? I'll second it. Roll call, Beth, please.
Clymer,
Yes.
Foil,
Yes.
Lido,
Yes.
Azanoff,
Yes.
Weeks,
Yes.
Chairman Van Lee.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. It was a long and arduous task, but good luck.
Thank you.
Glad I kept you coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That was not what I was expecting. Nor I, Mr. Peck, nor I. I don't think anyone's complaining. Well, I guess.
Our next applicant is Avantor Performance Materials LLC. This is for a solar property to be located on Block 5 and Lot 4. And this is the hearing. So, good evening again, Mr. Peck. I'm glad you came because I'd have missed you.
It's good to see you as well, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. For the record, Mark Peck with the Florio Prucci Law Firm. On behalf of the applicant of Avantor Performance Materials, LLC, we're here seeking preliminary and final site plan approval with bulk variance relief to install a ballast-mounted solar facility on property located at 1071 to 1085 River Road here in the Township. It's otherwise known as Lot 4 in Block 5. But before we get going, we were deemed complete at your meeting last month on September 28, and we have published and served all the necessary notices, and I just provided the final piece of the notice affidavit to Ms. Dilks, so the board has jurisdiction.
That's fine. And for the benefit of the record and for you, Mr. Peck, with that notice issue, Mr. Clymer is disqualified from sitting on this particular application because
Okay.
he is interested as an owner within 200 feet, just so you know.
Okay, sure, very good. And speaking of the property, the lot in question itself, it's an approximately 30-acre parcel located between River Road and the Delaware River in the township's ROM zone, and it's right where it abuts with Phillipsburg. The Avantor facility spans both Phillipsburg and Lopatcong. In Lopatcong, solar facilities in the ROM zone are permitted as an accessory use, and the proposed facility here will supply a portion of Avantor's needs, like 10-15%, so it is accessory to the principal use. And the solar facility itself will be approximately 4 acres, and it will be constructed over a capped landfill on the site. And as such, anything that may be approved here tonight is subject to DEP approval. They want to make sure, you're messing with a landfill, they want to make, absolutely sure it's okay. So there's that added level of regulatory assurance. This project does require 2 variances. The first is from section 243-75B3D, which is all electrical wires servicing the ground-mounted solar system are to be underground. And again, because of the capped landfill, we're not doing much in the way of excavation. That's why it's ballast mounted. And the second is from section 243-75B3C, which requires 8 feet high evergreen screening along the roadway, and we're not proposing that screening. Tonight we have as our witnesses Michael Thomas. He's the site engineer from T&M Associates, and he'll lead you through the site plan and answer any technical questions. And then we have John McDonough, who's our planner, and he'll address the variance proofs. And we've also received and reviewed the September 23rd planning review, as well as the October 23rd engineering technical review, and we'll of course be addressing those in the hearing. So without any further ado, I'd like to call Mr. Thomas, our first witness.
Good.
Thank you. Michael?
Okay. Mr. Thomas, oh, I'm sorry. No, do you need to do something?
Yeah, I was just going to bring the
Sure.
the exhibit up. Sure. Sorry.
Okay, just raise your right hand. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Thomas, just state your full name, spell your last for the record.
Sure. Michael Richard Thomas, last name spelled Thomas.
Thank you, sir. And while Mr. Peck's doing that, why don't you give the board the benefit of your credentials?
Sure. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I have about 18 years of practical site development experience. I also do work on the water resources side, so I do some H&H as well. I've been doing this for a little while. I've been presented in front of many boards across the state of New Jersey, as well as solar projects, including other types of projects, such as Class A office buildings, retail. We also do a lot of healthcare facilities. So,
License is current.
yes.
Move Mr. Thomas as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
I believe we can consider him well qualified for this position.
Very good, thank you. Michael, you're familiar with the site in question?
And yes.
Okay, can you describe its, current conditions?
Sure. And is it, if it's okay with everybody, I'd just like to provide a handout of the exhibit that we're presenting tonight. If we could, yeah, that's great, thank you. Do you want me to mark the?
Yeah, if you could mark that as A1 with today's date.
That's a colorized site rendering, is that fair?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thanks.
What are you doing?
I'll pass it to you. The other day.
Thomas, could you explain what A1 is?
Sure. So this is a colorized rendering of our site plan, inclusive with some of the other existing and proposed features we had on site, such as the electrical wiring and other features that are on the other plan sheets.
Can you describe the property and the surrounding properties?
Sure. So plan north on our plan here is to the right of the page. The actual true north. The project site, as what was mentioned earlier, is located along River Road. It's part of the Avantor existing industrial facility. The site is pretty much adjacent to the Delaware River, and then just to the west of the site, there is the Norfolk Southern right-of-way, which runs through there. Just to the north of our site, we have the Aqua existing facility that's there. And then to the south of our site, there's more of the Avantor existing industrial facility, as well as the SSC existing concrete plant, which is adjacent to where our landfill is. So what's sort of interesting about this project, as was mentioned previously when we were here for our completeness hearing, is that the municipal boundary line bisects Avantor's existing property, and they have a few lots that they own. And we are doing this as one sort of cumulative solar project, if that makes sense. Even though a portion of the solar is going to be located in Phillipsburg, the other portion is going to be located within Lopatcong. The portion that's located within Lopatcong, we're proposing solar over an existing landfill, whereas on the Phillipsburg side, it's canopy solar arrays over their existing parking lot and their loading areas as well. So I'll just give a little bit of background of the environmental constraints on the site. So we wanted to make sure, obviously, that what we're putting here was not in violation of any existing environmental constraints like wetlands, flood hazard areas, and the like. So one of our wetland scientists walked the site, especially in this particular area because it's grassed, just to verify that there was no existing wetlands or transition areas there. And we provided an affidavit along with our application package, which verified that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the existing landfill that's there today and where it is. So that landfill it's been permitted by NJDEP. It's been there for a few years now. It's been capped.
And what do you mean when they say capped? Well, what does that mean?
So essentially, there is a level of contamination that's underneath the landfill, and to prevent any kind of, I'll call it, escape of gases or other types of materials outside of that cap essentially is a barrier between that and where the top of the landfill is.
So it's like a hard plastic type covering.
Correct. It's in some cases landfills include only just something simple like a gravel or something to this effect, but it's all administered through the landfill folks over at NJDEP and permitted through them. We have an application for this particular project into them as well right now. I was able to finally get in touch with them today. We were struggling a little bit back and forth with getting some feedback from them. But they were able to get back to us today and said that the application is under their review. They're about to issue us a review letter within the next week. I asked them quite blankly on the call if there were any fatal flaws that they had identified on the plan, and they said that there were not. And there were a few technical comments they wanted us to address. I'll know a little bit more about that when I receive the review letter, and we can obviously share that with the rest of the board professionals if necessary. And with regard to what I'm talking about,
And nothing can proceed, like if we're able to secure an approval from the board here tonight, nothing can proceed until DEP issues its approval saying that this meets all their requirements for installing this over the landfill, correct?
That's correct. So we're applying for a major landfill disruption permit from NJDEP. So obviously we have to have that in hand before we can do any work over this existing landfill. Some of the other permits that we had submitted for this project included the Upper Delaware Soil Conservation District. We did receive approval from them in August of this year, in the middle of August of this year. We also had submitted to the Warren County Planning Board. We did get a review letter back in late August of this year, and we did resubmit back into them in mid-September, so we're waiting to hear back from them from that. And then Phillipsburg as well. We have our completeness hearing scheduled for tomorrow night, and then hopefully the regular hearing would be scheduled. I think it's the 21st. 21st of November. So everything's in motion right now. All the permits have been submitted. We are waiting, obviously, for all the review comments, but we have been resubmitting back to the agencies as they've been coming in. So I'll just give a little bit of background about the solar array as well, and generally speaking, what we're trying to do here. So because there is an existing landfill there, we're not allowed to really pierce the existing cap that's there. They have a series of vents that are located across the landfill that allow methane gas to essentially escape from it. The cap itself is really not allowed to be pierced unless there's other provisions associated with it. So protective measures and other things in place. That wasn't really the intent of what Avantor or our applicant wanted to do here. They didn't want to disrupt the landfill. They didn't want to penetrate the landfill in any way, really, shape, or form. So what we're proposing here is a ballasted system that lays over top of the landfill. And that ballasted system consists of these large concrete blocks. More specifically, they're approximately 9 foot by 5 foot and from a length to width ratio. And those blocks are quite heavy. So we had to do structural calculations on it to verify that not only that the blocks can withstand any kind of wind or hurricane-related forces, but also that it wouldn't crush what's going on underneath. And all this has been submitted to NJDEP. It's under their review right now to make sure that it's in compliance and conformance with their requirements. One of the other things, too, from a weight point of view, that's kind of unique about this site is obviously we have to leave the site open for emergency vehicles to access around the perimeter of it. So what we've designed here, what we've essentially reserved, if you will, is an emergency wetland or emergency vegetative access way, which is about 20 foot wide. It runs around the perimeter of where the array is. And that will allow an emergency vehicle, for instance, like a fire truck or something similar in nature, to essentially traverse around the perimeter. We did design the truck turning templates that we had on here for the largest size fire truck that we could find, and we've checked a few different townships around the way to find really the largest one that we could find, and it has equivalent turning radius to about a WB50 that's out there. So we wanted to make sure it was conservatively designed and that someone could actually realistically traverse around the site. So we're leaving that area reserved or untouched. But what we're also doing here is a little bit unique in that the solar array, it's a passive installation that we're talking about here. And generally speaking, there's really not going to be anybody out there for most of the time. There's going to be some maintenance that comes out to the site. It could be up to like maybe 4 to 8 times a year is probably typical. The array itself is monitored remotely, so they have that ability to make sure that the things are working normally and operating the way they should, and if there's a problem, then somebody can come out to the site as necessary. But generally speaking, it's a passive system. You're not going to see a lot of vehicular traffic out here. If a maintenance vehicle, like a truck or something like this, a pickup 4x4, needs to get out there, they can certainly do that as necessary, but it's not going to be frequent. So given all that information, generally speaking, what we typically do with ground mount arrays like this is we allow the grass to actually grow a little bit higher. And the reason why we do this is because the ballasted system that's there, these blocks, along with the posts that are associated with the ground, they have an impervious surface that's associated with them. The state of New Jersey, several years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago, classified solar arrays essentially as non-impervious surfaces, with the exception of their foundation systems, posts, and anything else that's underneath it that's associated with it. So in this particular case, for this project, there are really 2 types of impervious surfaces. The first are the posts, and the other is the actual ballasted blocks themselves. So to offset that impervious that we're putting on this grass facility, we're allowing the grass to grow a little bit higher into a meadow type of condition. The meadow grass that we're proposing is frequently used for ground-mounted solar installations similar to this, and it's like a wildflower mix, if you will. And it grows somewhat high. It can get up to about 2 foot tall before you have to cut it. And the maintenance of it is quite minimal. It's usually recommended to cut it down 1 to 2 times per year, depending on how fast it's growing. So what we're actually providing here is kind of like a different land cover than what is there today. A little bit different. There's a short-cut grass that's there today. This new grass is going to grow a little bit taller. It's not going to shade the arrays. It's going to get up to about 18 inches to about 2 feet, but it is going to be a different land cover. And by having that different land cover, it actually slows down the runoff on the site from a stormwater management point of view. So that helps offset the new impervious that's being proposed here. Other things that are kind of unique about the landfill is that, as I mentioned before, we're not proposing anything that's piercing the caps. So our electrical conduit that we're proposing on here is actually going to be resting on top of the landfill. So we're using a product called Durablock. And I don't know if you guys have seen it before, but I'm sure if you've ever been to any kind of a party that folks were having with a large number of people, they put the electrical wires that are running on the ground, they put it inside this kind of Durablock, and vehicles can run over on top of it. It can handle the weight of with H20 loading, like a tractor trailer or something to this effect, and nothing will really happen to it.
And that explains the one variance that we're seeking where, we can't bury the lines, and that's because it's on the capped landfill and has to be in this dirt block.
Yes, yeah, so in this vein, we are requesting technically a variance, even though we're not actually disturbing the ground, to do this. And the nice thing about this is that this, it allows the system to be a little bit flexible, right? So for instance, if an array needs to be taken offline, or if a durable block needs to be removed because for whatever reason, or something to this effect, you could do that relatively easily with this system that's being proposed, this ballasted type system. And these systems are very, very common on top of roofs. You'll see ballasted type systems on rooftop structures, very, very common. This is just like a much larger roof, if you will, that we're talking about here. So some of the things Mark had mentioned a little while before, that the system that we're proposing combined with the one in Phillipsburg is intended to offset about 10 to 15% of what the energy output is coming from Avantor. We had an interesting finding that happened about a week ago, because we had submitted for an interconnection application into JCP&L. And this is a net meter project that we're proposing, so there's no direct connect into the actual grid. It's just essentially designed to rewind the meter that's within the existing facility. However, the existing circuitry that's out there today does not have the capacity to really handle what we had originally submitted as part of this project. And I know there were some concerns about some of the arrays that were located to the south of the site, which you can see where my hand is over here, that they're located within existing, we'll call it storm sewer easements that are running out to the Delaware. We had discussed that a little bit during the last completeness hearing. So given the fact that the circuitry does not really have, at least today, doesn't really have the capacity to handle, and there was concern about those specific arrays, which are located a little bit further to the south, the applicant is agreeable to essentially removing those specific arrays that were on the south end. And the ones that I'm referring to is just on the south side where we have our emergency vegetative access drive.
So those on the far left are being taken out?
Yes.
All with the building, right? The two structures,
Yeah, so we have.
are you leaving them or they can
Yeah.
also?
I'll just give a quick overview of what we're providing. So we're, as part of this system, and I don't know how familiar everybody is with solar systems, or if you guys know how they generally work, but when the sun hits the arrays, it hits the silicon, it excites the silicon. Essentially what it does is it creates a current, from that excitement. And that current is a direct current, so it's a DC current, and then goes to an inverter. And that inverter switches it from DC to AC. And then from that point, as it switches it then goes over to a switch gear. And then from that switch gear pad, which is located to the south of our site where those few arrays we were just talking about, that allows that electricity to be safely distributed into the existing network that's there. So where are we connecting into? It's not shown on this page, but we have a separate printout of the site plans that were submitted.
So we'll mark this as A2.
And this is part of the plans that were submitted as part of the original submission. And the sheet that I wanted to show you was the utility page.
Which is sheet is that?
Sheet 12 of 30 of the submitted site plan package. And you want me to mark this?
Yeah, mark that A2, just.
Sure. I'll come back to the front too and do it. So it's a little hard to see all this, but on the colorized exhibit, we have a series of the electrical, I'll call it above ground wiring, the one that's laying on the ground, which runs from a north to south direction, and then it would connect into the proposed switchgear pad, which is located on the south side. From there, it would connect into an existing overhead electrical pole, which runs in a southbound direction, and that continues to where my hand is right now on sheet 12 of 30. And then there's an existing transformer down at its interconnect point. So that's where our point of connection is for the Lopatcong side of things. It's a little bit different on the other side with Phillipsburg, but I just wanted to bring that out just so everybody was aware of this. And that's a 5 kV line that we're proposing overhead to that point of connection, for everyone's awareness.
When you say you're laying the cables on the ground, are they going to be encased in any kind of conduit, or they're just laying out there, or?
Yeah, so everything is intended to meet the National Electric Code with regard to wiring that's there. The DuraBlock itself is pretty self-containing, and it's intended and designed for vehicular types of movements. So like any kind of large vehicle, including tractor trailer, any H20 loading type of vehicle can ride over it without it dismembering or ripping apart or doing anything like that.
Oh, I'm more concerned with the exposure of the actual wiring.
Yep, yeah, so all the conduit is going to
Is that just
be,
an open cable, or is it going to be a conduit?
no, it is protected. And I know there was a question.
It'll be sheathed and then within a conduit.
Yep, yeah, I know there was a question about some of the, electrical shock that came in one of the review letters. I think it was the planner's review letter from the prior completeness hearing. But everything is being designed in accordance with the National Electric Code. Some other specifics about that. The system itself, and most solar systems are designed this way, has a rapid shutdown associated with it. So if there's like a loss of power or something to this thing, the arrays will turn off. It's essentially, it just turns off. It doesn't just continue to generate electricity while there's a loss of power. And there's also grounding that's built into all these components. So all these things, and this is very, very typical for solar installations. Like there's nothing like surprising really about what I'm saying, but I just wanted to make sure that that there was an understanding that there are safeguards built into the system, to prevent any kind of fire, any kind of emergency, any kind of electrical shock or something to this effect.
Where does the shut-off occur in relationship to the actual panels that are constantly generating electricity?
So I believe it's at the inverter and also at the switchgear level.
But the wiring connecting the panels themselves will be live at all times?
No. Like I said, these inverters have these shutdowns sort of built into it, and so it essentially will not allow the system to generate any more electricity that's running through it. So.
Sir, how long ago?
I'm confused on the fact that you have solar panels. Is there a switch there to turn that panel off to that wiring, or does that go to the inverter?
No.
To shut off the inverter?
No, there's no shutdown at the panel itself. It's done at either the inverter location or at the
I'm
switch.
just concerned with if there is some fire or any emergency and our personnel go there, are they aware that these panels are live?
Let me see if I can straighten out the question. Let's call a panel A, call the inverter B.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fault, and it shuts down at B.
Mm-hmm.
Is there still juice running from A to B?
No, that's essentially what I was trying to say. So once this shutdown goes in, it's no longer live.
Is that because there's the circuit closes and there's no flow?
Correct, yes.
Yeah,
and all these things are built, like, this is nothing like, I've been providing testimony for projects that are similar to this since about 2010. And even then, all this has been built into the systems, these emergency shutdown systems and so on and so forth, so to essentially prevent a fire from happening or something to that effect. So all this is done, like I said, in accordance with the National Electric Code. So there's no, these systems have to be employed so that fire does not happen in so many ways.
So there's a AAA at your panel somewhere.
Correct.
That's what you're trying to say.
Yes.
Right, there's a trip out, all right, so am I correct?
Yes.
All right, so the panel can't produce anything going out of it.
Correct,
That's what
yes.
you're saying, okay. My question is, you've got grass that's 2 feet tall, let's say, just 18, 2 feet tall. All right, you've got electrical laying on the ground how is the gentleman coming in to cut that grass twice a year going to know where that is?
So typically what happens with the solar arrays, you can cut underneath it if you want. If you choose not to, that's okay. You know, you don't have to cut it underneath. It is generally recommended to cut it once per year, just for the seasonal growth of the wildflower mix to make sure it's working properly and so on and so forth. But yeah, they would have to use a combination of mowers and trimmers.
What are
and
you
such.
going to do to let the mower know where that cable is my question. All right, how are you going to protect the mower guy?
Right, so again, all the wiring that's on here, all the electrical wiring that's resting on the Durablock and the other pieces that are associated with it, everything is protected with protective coating that's on the outside of the electrical wiring. So there's nothing that's bare. That's lying
Now,
out
it's not a little bit like, I mean, I run the sidearms through town. They don't care if they hit stones, they break them. All right? You know what I mean? They take wood and they shatter it.
Would the mower deck be set at a level higher than the durable? Like, how low would the grass be cut?
It would be cut to essentially the level it is today. So that would be the recommended.
But not maintained at that level. So are you going to set something in place to say,
Yeah.
this line is the electrical, here's the stakes 10 feet tall, maybe?
Sure. Yeah,
That's what I'm asking.
Yep, yeah, and if necessary, it's possible, obviously, for anywhere where there's, the main electrical lines that are running around the array, and again, it's running around the perimeter sides. And let me show the exhibit one more time.
Is that the little E
Yes.
and the lines? Okay. So essentially on the northwestern side of the, true northwestern side of the,
Yeah, so if everybody kind of follows my hand here, so this is on the very, very north side. You see the electric lines that we're showing here are kind of running around the perimeter on the outside, connecting the various inverters. And then the systems itself, the electrical wiring is essentially right underneath where the panels are. And that connects into, I'll call it on the western side of where everything is, that'll connect into the various inverter locations. So
Is there a way to get that electricity up higher that you've thought of or looked at? I just don't want somebody to go in there and cut that. I know what they can do, all right? And I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, I'm asking, all right? Should it be raised up above the grass height of normal?
Yeah, so underneath the panels, so the electrical wiring that connects the panels, that is connected underneath where the panels are. So,
Okay, but like how high? Like you're saying it's laying on the ground. Laying on the ground says how high?
so the part that's laying on the ground is the perimeter electrical conduit that
It's
runs.
still gonna cut there.
Correct, yes, but that will also have Durablock on it, though. That will also have Durablock.
Again, Durablock gives how high?
It's probably about 6 to 8 inches, maybe a little bit taller than that.
What color is the door block? Maybe
It's
bright orange, so the guy would be able to see it?
It's typically black. We have actually a detail of it. Come back here just for a second. See if I can find it. Yeah, it's typically black, but they do make it in various colors, so it can be something other than black. Moment.
Sir, how long ago was the land kept?
I don't know the exact time, but it's been there for, I believe, about 10 years.
10 years?
That's my
How
understanding.
long does that last? Is there usually a time when it doesn't work anymore?
The cap landfill, it's monitored. So typically, most landfills or most capped areas either have a biennial certification or an annual certification, where they have to essentially verify that it's still functioning in the way that it was originally intended. And if any adjustments need to be made, then they make that. That's not part of this project, though. So the landfill, the ongoing biennial monitoring of that landfill, that's between, I guess, Avantor and DEP. So that's, that continuance is whatever agreement that they did when the landfill was originally created. I apologize, I thought it was on this page, but I may.
Mr. Thomas, while you're looking for it, just a quick question. What's the diameter of the cables that are on this?
It depends. So it's similar in nature to, electrical conduit that's underground. So they're usually, the banks that they usually create are like about 3 to 4 inches conduit, it's usually PVC piping that they put underground. And they usually put it in a bank of like maybe 2 or 3, sometimes 4, conduit in there. In this particular case, it's going to be approximately the same size. So you could expect it up to like 3 to 4 inches thick.
Okay. Would it be a reasonable condition, just to put this issue to bed, that the maintenance contractor will flag the areas before they go through with a big blade?
Sure, yeah. I apologize. I'm trying to find it, but I can't.
Don't worry about it, because I think that we've covered that.
Right.
We'll have it flagged as a condition.
Could we return actually to A1? Could you give some of the bulk dimensional aspects of the solar field? Like how large is the lot itself? How large is the solar field going to be, and setbacks, things like that?
Sure. So with regard to some of the setbacks that are associated with it, so the main contender that we have here, for nearby properties is River Road, and then also the Aqua property, which is located to the north. So our closest array is about 102.29 feet away from the property line where Aqua is located. And then to River Road, that distance is 114.97. And then our other property, which is kind of to the south of us, I'll call it to the south and to the east, that's the concrete facility. We're about, at least with our arrays, but we're going to be removing those. The closest distance was about 54.65, but those arrays are going to be removed.
So is that all compliant with the ordinance?
Yes.
And how large will the solar field itself be?
So the arrays themselves, what we have proposed here, the individual, I'll call it aisles in between where the arrays are located, there is a 15-foot separation distance between arrays. The arrays themselves are aligned in a direction, so true north is moving on the right side of the page here. So the arrays essentially are perpendicular to where north is, and that's the way it kind of works in the northern hemisphere, because the sun is mostly towards the equator, so the arrays are tilted towards where the sun is, right? So it's tilted towards the equator. Most solar arrays are designed in that same manner. So the reason why the array looks the way it does here, because it follows that true north, and then that way it's pointing towards the south. As mentioned earlier, we had 7 total inverter pads. Those are 8 foot by 17 foot in size. The switchgear that we're proposing itself is 11 foot by 27 foot. The typical array dimension that we have shown up here is about 95 feet long. Some other dimensions, it's about 14.5 feet is the width of the array itself. And again, that's tilted, so that's a tilted width. And then in addition to that, the system itself, like I said, is going to be reduced in size just a little bit from where we are. One thing I did want to point out as well is that I mentioned earlier that there is some existing piping and I'll call it manholes and other types of features that are located within the landfill to allow for the off-gassing of the landfill and such. We are avoiding those specific locations, so we're not modifying those in any way, shape, or form, keeping a distance away from those areas. The aisle widths that we have designed at 15 foot were done so on purpose for 2 reasons. One is to allow a maintenance vehicle to enter inside in between the arrays, but also at the same time to prevent any kind of shading from one array to the next as we're moving across. The site, generally speaking, drains from a north to a south direction, so it's pretty gently sloped. We don't really have to worry about regrading the site or doing anything like that and worry about shading from one panel to the next because it is gently sloped. But the site itself, the landfill, is a bit in a bowl that's there today, where the slopes around the perimeter of the landfill are steep, kind of going down into the site, about almost 10 foot at some points. And then it's more gently sloped when you're in the landfill itself. So
Have you had the opportunity to review the Collier's October 23rd, 2022 technical review letter?
Yes.
Okay, do we want to quickly just go through that and address any comments?
Sure. So one of the comments on here had requested us to obviously submit something to the township fire official. We haven't done that yet, but we can absolutely do that. That's not a problem. And have him review our perimeter truck turning exhibits that we provided, as well as any existing fire hydrants that are nearby the site. There was a comment that talked about the easements and the concern with putting the arrays over those existing easements, but we're in agreement to essentially removing those southerly arrays from the proposal.
So that is referenced in 2.02.
That's
three
correct.
southernmost arrays.
That's correct, yes. There was a comment that had talked about the existing entrance driveway into the site. So there is an existing, I'll call it broken asphalt / gravel driveway that enters the site. And just for everyone's edification, there's a perimeter fence around the site as well. But at the entranceway, which is located, I'll call it to the south and to the east of where the array is located, there was a request to essentially upgrade that to something that meets the township ordinance requirements, which is a 6-inch minimum DGA with 2 inches of asphalt requested. And we have no issues with providing that. There were some comments that were requested regarding soil erosion sediment control, including the location of where the construction driveway is. So since we are going to be improving that driveway, we could certainly accommodate the construction driveway there. We did get approval from, as I mentioned earlier, from the Upper Delaware Soil Conservation District. So, we can provide the construction driveway there, as I mentioned. There was a question about staging and how this is being staged. So we do have an area that is reserved on the Phillipsburg side for lay down material. And I'll refer back to the site plans that were submitted. And because of the long lead times that are associated with a lot of materials right now, including steel and other things, our folks need to, our electrical folks, they need to place the orders for some of these equipment now so that they arrive in a reasonable amount of time. And I'll show the page right before this one, which is the soil erosion sediment control plan on the Phillipsburg side. It's sheet 15 of 30 of the submitted site plan set, but there's an existing, I'll call it a truck turnaround area, which is located kind of to the north, closer towards North Main Street or River Road. And that area has generally been reserved for lay down of materials, equipment, and so on and so forth. So that may be also a spot where, like, for instance, the ballasted blocks may be located, and so on and so forth. That was the primary area that we were looking at for staging. In addition to that, I think there was a question on, I think that did it for the soil
that covers that.
control.
So you're on grading, drainage, and utilities, section 3.
Yep. So we had discussed previously the stormwater management and how we sort of arrived at the answer that we did with regard to that. There was they talked about the closed depression, and I'll switch back again to the other exhibit. So on the southeastern corner of the proposed array, there's an existing drainage feature which is nearby to there. And there was some concern when we had the completeness hearing and also in the review letter about any impacts that we might be doing to that array. And it is more likely now, again, given with the response we received from JCP&L, that even the closest array that's to that existing drainage feature may be removed from the site. So that should hopefully eliminate any concerns, at least in and around that area. So, and the client, we wouldn't have any issues with eliminating that, so to speak, and leaving the existing riprap apron that's over there in place. In addition, we had talked about the driveway and improving it to the new dense graded aggregate, which we have no problem with. We talked about the stormwater runoff.
Everything else seems to be good with that section, right?
Yep, we talked a little bit about the permits and the status of that right now. The 30-foot tall pole detail and the methodology for the depth of installation of the new utility poles that may or may not be replaced. And just as a side note, there's some existing poles that are out there today which are not in bad condition, but we have to leave the option open for replacing it if necessary. And it's mostly dictated by JCP&L.
And then, sorry, not to cut you off, but just to touch on that. So all those poles will be installed outside of the limits of the landfill?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, and we can certainly provide the depth, some more details.
You'll update the details.
Yep. Yeah, we could provide that. That's not a problem. One question that talked about the maximum height to make sure that the arrays that we're proposing at its worst case scenario is less than 8 foot in height, and we could certainly provide that detail and update that. That's not a problem. This system is, some systems that we do design are terraced, but this is not one of those systems. It follows the contours of the existing landfill. So there's really no changes in grade to make the arrays taller than they would otherwise be from the existing grade. Frequency of visits and so on and so forth. We talked about this a little bit. It's really not necessary to come out to the site unless it's necessary, but it's probably typical for a maintenance vehicle to come out there at least 6 times a year, something like this, and sometimes more if necessary, just to make sure that everything is working properly. If there's any kind of damage that occurred, or if there's something that fell on one of the arrays or something to this effect, they go deal with that, or if the grass needs to be cut, so on and so forth. So but it's not like I said, it's a passive system. So the number of trips out here is practically nothing. With regard to, I'll just touch on this a little bit, glint and glare with solar arrays. So it's I guess it's maybe kind of a misconception about solar arrays. So solar arrays are designed to absorb sunlight, not reflect it back. That's how they're made, and all of them are made this way pretty much. If there's any kind of glass surfaces, which is really not in this case, it wouldn't be reflecting back into any type of residential area or nearby property or so on and so forth. So in this particular case, glint and glare is not really applicable to this type of installation or this type of system.
And this doesn't create any noise, odor, any other nuisance characteristics?
Yeah, no, odor actually not. The buzzing noise that you hear sometimes from the inverters or from the switchgear or the transformers is really typical of what you would hear on any transformer or something to that effect. And all of these pieces of equipment are set back quite a distance away from where the property lines are, so we're going to be absolutely in compliance with the DEP criteria with regard to that, if there is any buzzing that occurs with that. The age of the arrays and commissioning or decommissioning and all the rest of this. So most solar arrays, I would say maybe like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, the average lifespan of the array could get up to like 25 years, maybe 30 years. The newer arrays can go much longer than that. So it's usually what we say is about 30 years is the average span, but it's very typical with these, the technology is getting better and the arrays are lasting longer, and they also have more wattage on these individual arrays. So 30 years or longer is probably more typical now than that, and this system kind of makes it simple to either replace or decommission because it's ballasted and everything is above grade. So it makes it simpler to take things down if necessary.
Good. So I think, does that conclude your direct testimony?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, certainly, board.
Sorry. In between office property and your property, there's a road that goes back. Okay, behind that, I just want to make sure that none of your poles, none of your nothing's going to impede that road, because that goes back to township property back there.
Yeah, so this overhead line that you see, which is a little bit darker,
Right.
that's existing conditions.
It's already existing, so where
That's
is your
existing.
new lines going to run the same place, or it's not going to change? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, so our proposed line, so we have the, I'll call it above grade electric line, which again is running around the western perimeter of where the array is.
Okay, so it's out of New England.
That's out of the way, and then we're tying in with new overhead electric, I'll call it to the north or to the south and to the west of where the array is.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the board or the professionals?
You could, George?
Well, I just wanted to go over a few things in my letter, not that there's a great deal in it. I guess the first thing, just for the record, it appeared on the original set of drawings that the setbacks for the front yard were drawn from the center line of the road. They should be drawn, even though there's not a right-of-way out there, as far as I know, they ought to be measured from at least, offset 25 feet from the center line before you draw. You're all right. I don't think anything encroaches. But I think the way they're drawn, they were drawn from the center line.
Yeah, so this is a bit of an unusual lot. I'm not going to lie about it, in that the right-of-way line or the property line actually encroaches in the middle of the existing roadway that's there today. So we're actually in the process of getting a few more ducks in a row to just verify exactly where that is, to make sure that it is, in fact, where it's been on all these historic documents. However, we can certainly measure it from like the curb line or edge of pavement, or even 25 feet as suggested. I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah, well, I'll defer to the town. I'm not even sure this is the right time to bring it up, but since normally, as part of the subdivision, we'd be looking for a dedication to get the road in a right-of-way. Would you be willing to consider that at this time, to actually work with the township engineer and get that road in a right-of-way?
We can consider that, and I can't, that's not something that I've discussed with the client, so we're not in a position to bind the client with that. But we could certainly accept as a condition that we would work with the township to address historic surveying issues relating to River Road.
Yeah, and then at least for this application, measure the front yard setback from.
Just on our final plans.
That's
That was
right,
today.
so that you provide for, even though it might not be a dedicated right of way, that you measure.
We can easily do that.
Yes, all right, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
The other only major issue I had was just landscaping. One of the requirements on all the solar fields is that they do provide some landscape buffering along property lines, along highways. The applicant is proposing none in this case. Clearly, this doesn't abut any residential area. And quite frankly, on the road side, the opposite side of the road is all county property and parkland. The only question I'd have is not whether this requires buffering all the way around. I don't think it does. But clearly along the road, it seems to me that it would be appropriate to provide some buffering, even if it's nothing but street trees, to try to bring a canopy in and try to close that up. The applicant's own picture shows how open that area is. And I think some landscaping running along the road, either as a line of trees or shrubs of that have a potential height of 6 to 8 feet, would be a nice addition along that road and would not be excessive to make him do that. And so I think it's something the board should consider, is actually having some landscaping established along the road and not left just as a total open field. Because remember, all the traveling public's going to be above and looking down on this thing. It's going to be noticeable. So that's my one question there. All the other information here is very minor and doesn't relate to specific trades, just minor things that go on the drawing.
Yeah, so with regard to landscaping, I know our planner will provide some testimony with regard to it as well. So one of the things that we are providing, in addition to the meadow area within the solar array itself, is along I'll call it the edge of the roadway. So we are proposing meadow grass, essentially right at the edge, and it goes
Flowering meadow grass, right?
Correct, yeah. And again, this is the same meadow grass that's intended to, grow up to about 2 foot tall, But There's a few things that I did want to, make aware of here. What's kind of unique about Avantor, around their perimeter is they do have slats on their fence that run around the perimeter. This is kind of the one section of roadway that doesn't have that, or one section of the site that doesn't have that. Like, for instance, if you look at the adjacent to the Aqua development, they have the white slats over there, and if you get closer towards Phillipsburg, they have the slats over there, and I believe they're brown in color, so that's what I remember. It's the one section that's not. And to your point is well taken about the view shed here. The arrays, though, as they're going to be laid down on here, are not going to impact, I'll call it, the view shed of the surrounding background, like the more mountainous region that's in the back and so on and so forth. And we are providing essentially meadow grass, which is on the flip side, on the other side, the Avantor side of where the fence is located right now.
Well, I understand that, and I agree with you. I would hate to see a slat fence out there. Having it open, I think, is a much nicer detail to the fence than actually having a solid fence. I'm not suggesting we build a barrier. I'm just suggesting that we put some landscaping in there that defines the roadway as compared to the open field. And that could be simply street trees.
Yeah, we could do that, except as a condition that we'll work with the board planner on having some landscaping in the form of street trees along River Road.
I don't know if I like the meadow grass along the side of it. You want to put it right up to the road. That meadow grass gets 2 feet tall when it gets tall enough and it rains, it falls into the road 2 feet.
Well, it's not going to be.
So it's got to be back.
Yeah, it's going to be on the Avantor side of the fence, not on
That's
the.
what I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, not on the roadway side. So that was the intent behind it. But there's one thing that is important. One of the main reasons why we didn't put like larger plantings, trees, things like this, is because it can pierce the cap, and we just don't want to do that. Now, that said, as we get closer towards the fence line, I don't see any issue. We could put some kind of, I'll call it screening, if you will. What that might consist of, a little bit closer to the fence line, so it doesn't actually adversely impact the cap itself.
Well, that's fine. I don't want to plant in your cap. Just behind the fence line would be fine.
Okay, so we'll work with Mr. Ritter on that.
Thank you.
This showing northeast is wildflower mix. Is this what you mentioned as prairie grass? Is this throughout the project, or is this just a strip underneath?
So on the exhibit that I had handed out, where I'm showing right now, it's kind of the darker green areas where we intended for that to grow.
Okay.
So it's just within those areas, and we do need, just to make sure it's clear, for the emergency access, vegetative access around that does need to be cut as it is today, just so we can maintain that access that's through there.
Was it chosen simply for, not showiness, or was it, I know the purple coneflower is quite popular with pollinators. Was that taken into consideration too?
Yeah, so the Ernst mix that we had shown here is very commonly used on ground-mounted larger arrays similar to this, for the very reason that it creates that meadow type of condition that's also somewhat pleasant to look at, right? So, but it is composed of a lot of different components to it, the mix itself, and it's pretty popular for these types of installations. So, and it's also more readily available as well.
Anything for Adam?
I think we covered everything.
Good.
Yep.
I'm fine.
We fine with everything? Okay. Any questions from the board? If not, I'll open this to the public to ask any questions of this gentleman.
I have a question. Am I allowed to ask a question?
As a citizen?
As a citizen, you are.
Okay.
Just touch, if you can, on the noise level again, and which units are going to create the noise level?
Sure. So again, we have 7 inverters that we're proposing. They're mostly located, I'll call it, on the western side of where the array is. And they're further away, they're set back further away from where the roadway is and also where the Aqua facility is. And for everyone's awareness, there is the railroad track, which is right behind it, which obviously makes a lot more noise. The proposed switchgear pad is located on the south right here. There may be a need to relocate that closer towards the array, given that the southerly section is not going to be use, and we're not going to be utilizing that area. But generally speaking, it's probably going to remain where we have it shown right now on the plan. And again, the buzzing noises that you might hear, this is very similar in nature to any other transformer that you might hear that's associated with an existing building, like this building, for instance. Coming outside.
Where do you live in relation to this solar field, if I may ask?
I live up on the hill.
So heading north, like past the Opera,
No, heading,
or heading east?
Delaware Street, that helps.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and
So that's on the other side, the noise-making stuff's on the other side from that.
what decibel level would you estimate that to be?
so I don't know the exact decibel level that this system is going to produce, but what I can say is that at the property line, which is essentially the NJDEP requirement, that it will meet the decibel. So it's 65 dBA during the daytime and 50 dBA during the nighttime. And the system that we have proposed here, because of the fact that everything is set back as far as it is, it will easily meet those requirements at the property line.
That's pretty high. If it's constant.
Only way to know is to take some sound level.
Can you do that, put a sound barrier around them so that it knocks that down?
I don't see, like during construction, when they make the system live, they could do some readings. I don't think that would be an issue. I don't think client would have a problem with that.
I think he's asking, can you put a barrier around it?
Yeah, but I don't.
Absorb the noise.
I don't think they're as loud, I mean, they might be that loud next to the inverters, correct? But by the time you get to, say, River Road, that sound's gonna be degraded.
Yeah.
Significantly.
So all sound follows the inverse square law. So as the distance gets larger, the sound dissipates quite substantially.
I understand, but
So-
you just said that it would be to the limits required at the property line.
Correct, and those are the state of New Jersey requirements.
But they're not gonna be those 65 decibels at the property line.
No, they'll be less, equal to or less than.
They'll be underneath.
Correct.
So do you have an objection to putting a sound barrier around them to ensure that it's not going to disturb the residents?
We do, because we don't think it's actually necessary with all due respect. It's not gonna be loud. I mean, you've heard like a transformer humming on a pole, walking down the street, but that's when you're right underneath or on that block. You get,
200, 300 feet away, it's.
feet away,
Yeah,
those pads are how many feet from River Road that are gonna make noise? That's the closest one.
So yeah, the closest one. So the closest one that we have to where the roadway is about 240 feet or so.
And that's the closest one.
Correct. And this one that's on, I'll call it the northerly side here, is about 160, 170 feet away.
Yeah, that's my concern. I'm for the project. I think it's a great use of the land. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't want to be
No,
hearing
understood.
humming for 24/7.
Understood. Do they make noise at night?
No, when there's no sun on them, they don't, yeah, the panels don't make any noise, that's correct. The inverters might still make a little noise, but, one thing is, just to maybe a point of comparison, sound attenuating enclosures are more typical on generators. Generators produce like a lot more noise, especially emergency generators. And as they get closer to a property line, it really necessitates like an enclosure around it to essentially attenuate the sound. In this particular case, these are so far away from it, and these don't make anywhere near the noise levels that a generator would make. So just as a point of comparison.
Just for a comparison, are they the same in general setup? Not holding you to exact, just an idea, as what Bridges property has on it right now? I mean, would we be able to say that the noise would be comparable? You know what I mean?
Oh, the existing solar facility
Yeah.
there. Are you familiar with the solar facility on Stryker's Road?
I'm not, no.
But it's a ground-mounted facility. Same, so would you say that the noise emanating from this facility would be similar to another ground-mounted facility of, the same size?
Sure. And I'm not going to say that the system does not produce any noise during the daytime because.
But is it similar to, another facility? So if you have your typical ground-mounted facility, the sound levels, is it an apple-to-apple comparison? It's kind of, the noise level would be approximately the same?
Yes, only this is actually a much smaller system than we typically do for ground mount. The ground mounts are usually quite much larger than this in size, 200 acres or more sometimes.
So you would be able, maybe, be able to get a comparison of what the sound would be like coming from theirs if they chose to go and ask. All right, Bridge is property, let's say it's theirs right now. You'd be able to say how far out that goes before the decibel gets down to a point that you don't really hear.
Yeah,
For a test, you're saying, because you said before we would do a test after it's up. Well, after it's up, it's passed, it's on, it's not going to change too much. But that would give you an idea in this town how it would respond.
I don't think we've ever had that I'm aware of, any noise complaints
I
about
can't say I've ever heard
buzzing
but
from
he's got
that
his
solar
concern.
thing from the
Well,
other.
that's also,
You have to ask.
oh yeah, I guess that would make sense. The residential development behind the solar facility, that's what Gary's mentioning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've never
overlooks.
had-
We've never had any complaints about buzzing or anything like that.
No.
And this is only 4 acres, not so much.
I'd be very
larger.
careful if you were going to look into sound walls. There are a lot of other things involved in that you really want to get into, so.
Yeah, but generally speaking though, the state of New Jersey requirement is 65 dBA during the daytime and 50 dBA at nighttime. That's what we're required to meet.
It sounds like a lot of energy, but look into background forest noise is about 62 or 63 decibels on a night level. It doesn't do anything to the quality of the sound. It just affects the pressure of the sound. I'm not an expert, but
Sounded good.
Yeah. I was impressed. Are there any other questions from the public?
Yes, we're making sound comparisons.
can you come to the podium?
Oh, he didn't have to, so I didn't think I had to. But sure, I'll do it. I'll follow the rules, absolutely. I'm a rule follower. Due to the TAC 47 Kyle Drive. We're making sound comparisons. So how sound carries, yes? Can you compare the sound of continuous 24-hour tractor-trailer traffic at a warehouse?
I
That
object
sound?
to this.
You're getting way off the subject that we.
Why? We're comparing sound. I'm trying to say, I don't think it's the same level, decibel level, and I find it, and Mr. Peck, it's not
Do you have
anything
any facts and
against
figures
you.
on that?
It's more that we're concerned about the decibel levels where we live when we're a planning board member, but when Overlook got up and spoke about sound decibels, we didn't make those comparisons.
All right, I'm going.
So that's my statement.
You're out of order, sit down.
Sure, I'm a rule follower.
Well, if there's no other questions from the public, I'll call.
Seeing none, hearing none, we will close the portion of the question and them. Oh, this witness.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. John McDonough.
Mr. McDonough, do you swear or affirm that the testimony here about to give this words the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
I know it's redundant. Please state your name, spell your last for the record.
Sure. Hi there, everyone. My name is John McDonough. That's spelled MC, capital DONOUGH. And I'm the project planner.
And John, have you been accepted as an expert by this board before?
Yes, I have.
We'll continue to accept
You
it.
take notice of that and proceed. So you're familiar with the site plan and the site?
Yes, I am.
And the variances, the 2 variances that we're seeking?
Yes, very minimal relief that our applicant is seeking here. In fact, to put this solar array field in, bear in mind what you see on the board there that Michael just entered is a very small portion of what is a very large manufacturing facility that in Lopat here is over 30 acres. It extends over into the Phillipsburg side as well, another 15 or so acres. So It's a massive facility, it's developed, and this is a nice pocket with this open field, with this landform to fit or retrofit this renewable energy resource. And so I think our applicant here has done a real good job of promoting our environmental goals of sustainability, renewable energy, taking some of the consumption load off of the site, putting it back into the site through the use of solar arrays, which is exactly what many of our land use policies look to do, including your own in your master plan here. So certainly this facility, this accessory facility, is going to benefit a permitted use in the zone. Manufacturing is allowed here in the ROM district. The user, we're not dealing with a user variance, but we're dealing with a user here that happens to be a Fortune 500 company that not only benefits the public with jobs, but also provides services, the pharma industry, and also the healthcare industry as well. So this is going to benefit a beneficial use and a beneficial business as well, which is certainly a staple in your community and advances that goal for a stable, rateable base as well. So again, enhancing an established business with a commitment to the community. Here in the ROM zone district, your permitted uses include manufacturing facilities and also include solar arrays. So both the principal use here and the accessory use are permitted in your zone district, so no relief in that regard. You regulate this particular accessory use under section 243-75B, where you have a whole series of performance controls that are met here from top to bottom, but for two very minor deviations which have adequately been addressed through the vetting of the board and the applicant as well, and I think you have good stipulations on the record with respect to each of them. Number one, relief to allow above-ground wiring so as not to, common sense would dictate, to pierce the landfill. So we think there's a good solution there. I think your council gave the board good mitigative measure for flagging where those wires are, so there's no hazardous condition for those who maintain the field. Secondly, you do have a requirement that there be screening of these objects or this facility at 8 feet tall, slightly higher than a person. Here, again, we think it's a better planting alternative to go with a lower planting because that view shed along River Road is spectacular. You have this carpet of lawn, which is now your landfill, that exposes the mountain range in the back. And I am a landscape architect as well. We like to terminate our views in focal points, and that mountain range in the back there on the other side of the river is certainly a focal point that I think would be doing a disservice to the motoring public and to the surrounding area as well by going with taller plantings there. I think the intent is not to completely screen, but to create a soft edge. I think your planner has given the board a good solution there to incorporate more of a diversity of plantings to go along with the wildflowers that the applicant is proposing here. I think we can work in, again, working with your professionals, some ornamental grasses here, or some lower ground cover as well. I'll say knee-high, maybe hip-high, but I certainly don't think we want to go any higher than that. We do want to maintain that uninterrupted view of the mountain range in the background. So anything higher, I think, would be too intrusive and would defeat the purpose of what you're looking to achieve here. So again, a soft edge to separate the street from the site is adequately going to be addressed with the composition of plantings that are proposed here. The way we reconcile the relief that the applicant is seeking here is under that balancing test, the C2 balancing test, where we look at the benefits of the application as a whole, and we weigh them against those detriments, those two minor deviations that the applicant is seeking here. In terms of the project positives, as I said, the project is going to support a use that serves the biopharma and healthcare industries. The use itself is going to promote the public good with environmental sustainability and renewable energy. The new solar arrays, as you've heard, are going to offset the demand, the consumption needs by 10 to 15% of the electric consumption needs of the Avantor facility. These arrays are what I'll call low profile. You do have a good example over there at the Stryker facility, the Stryker Road facility, which I worked on as well, and can certainly attest that the construction there is going to be substantially similar to what the applicant is proposing here. The applicant has done a really good job of blending the build-out here with the surrounding landscape. Again, low-profile structures, integrating very well into a site that requires absolutely no tree removal. This is not a forested site, but basically a blank sheet of paper that's readily there to accommodate the use that's before you. We always bring it back to the core purposes of zoning. We've got efficient land use here. We've got variety of land uses, and all of the above would promote those fundamental purposes of zoning. There's about 24 of them in the statute, but I think the main ones we hit here. Purpose A, the promotion of the general welfare. Purpose C, to provide for adequate light, air, and open space. Purpose D, to provide for good planning compatible with adjacent municipalities. As you've heard, we've got a site that actually straddles a municipal border here. Purpose G, to provide for a variety of uses in appropriate locations. I think we could probably also put in purpose H to promote the free flow of traffic. This is a functionally inert, not to mention visually innocuous facility here that is certainly not going to generate any traffic or activity. Additionally, purpose I, the promotion of a desirable visual environment. I think this is going to take what's there and make it better with that nice soft edge along the perimeter. Purpose M, as I said, is the planning goal for efficient use of land. And then most importantly, purpose N, as in Nancy, which is right on point with what the applicant is proposing here. Quote, to promote renewable energy resources is a fundamental goal of planning, and that's right on point with what our applicant is doing here. Take all of that and counterbalancing it against the negative impacts associated with these very minor infractions of your ordinance. I think the board can certainly find that the relief, if granted here, will not cause any impacts of a substantially adverse nature, visually, functionally, physically, no substantially adverse impacts. Again, we've got that nice soft edge here and preserving those views of the mountains in the backdrop. I think we can find here that the relief is a better zoning alternative for the property, and in that regard, the relief is minimal and can certainly be granted without any substantial detriment to the public or without any substantial impairment to your zone plan. In conclusion, I believe based on all the testimony, the applicant has met its burden here. Statutory criteria for relief are met and approval is warranted. And that's all I have on direct.
Thank you very much. Does the board have any questions for Mr. McDonough?
In terms of, you work actually on the Strikers Road, the solar?
I was the planner over there, not on the solar, on the one that just got approved this evening.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. I mean, I would like to respect our own planners' thoughts about, and versus where you are in relation to River Road and this backdrop of Pennsylvania, I think you're referring to, although I think it would have behooved us to see such majesty if it's so important. I think it would be respectful, I think, to pepper the soft edge with a tree or three. I don't think that's too much to ask. I do respect the fact that you say,
we stipulated that we would work with Mr. Ritter to get some.
And I will certainly clarify that. The nice thing about a tree, really what I was trying not to achieve was the 8-foot evergreens along the front there to create a wall effect. The nice thing about a tree is the canopy is overhead, so you can see through it. And I didn't mean
some
to.
deciduous trees too that'll lose their leaves. We'll work with Mr.
Right.
Ritter.
We don't want to block the view. That's the main thing. If we can frame it, we'll certainly work with your professional in that regard.
Okay, thanks.
No more questions from the room. Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Do you have any questions of this witness on what he testified to? Go ahead.
To your point, Mike, I think the engineer mentioned that those units are 8 feet high. So if you're on the road and you look across, excuse me?
Is it a question for the witness?
No, I'm making a statement.
No, we're at questions of the witness.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
You can make a
Well,
statement in a
okay.
little
I
bit.
can question the witness. The fact that those units are 8 feet off the ground, right, and you're at road level, and you said maybe up to your knee or your hip.
Knee or hip, yes.
You're gonna see right over top of that, you're gonna see those panels.
Right. Again, I don't think the view of these panels is so distracting from what is really the focal point in the back. So the fact that we will not completely obscure the panels, I don't think creates a substantially adverse impact from a visual standpoint.
Well, I think from a planner standpoint, I think that's what we try to do, is to create that buffer so you don't have the look of the solar panels.
But I think also there's Mr. Thomas can address the grade change.
Yeah, so, out there today, it's like a bowl. So there's the landfill is like a depression in the ground. It's set down, I think at its highest point, it's either 10 or 12 feet deeper or below where the roadway elevation is. So these arrays that are gonna be there, even if they got up to 8 foot, they're not gonna be 8 foot, they're gonna be less than that. But even if they got up to 8 foot, for the most part, that's gonna be even lower than what the actual roadway grade elevation is. Just as a point of perspective.
But and also though, we'll work again with Mr. Ritter and, Mr. Wisniewski to with the landscaping and the buffering, so, to make sure that, we can cover that.
You satisfied, Jim? Okay.
I prefer the buffering as our planner suggested, but
There may be more questions from the public.
Any further questions?
Robert Bruce, 11 Harwich Road. I believe you testified that there were some fundamental aspects of planning. Did I get that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And one of them was to promote the flow of traffic.
Correct.
And another one was to promote the public good.
Correct.
And another one was to do so without substantial detriment to the public.
That's the negative criteria, but I'll say yes.
Okay. I just want to put a flag in there for the planning board.
Anyone else? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public portion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That would conclude our presentation on the hearing tonight. And I'm not going to belabor the point for the reasons that Mr. McDonough basically just set forth. I would ask that the board grant the relief that we request and approve the application. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, we'll open for public comment on this application. Hearing and seeing none, we'll close that public portion. Move on to granting relief requested on this. Is any questions on it? I'll entertain a motion to grant the waivers requested here.
Yeah, so this will be an approval for preliminary and final site plan with associated variance relief for the 8-foot high hedgerow, with the stipulation that they're gonna coordinate with our planner as to that, and also for not having buried lines. So those are the two variances. Other than that, it's preliminary and final site plan approval.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for that.
And removing this.
Yeah, that would be included as part of the conditions.
Do I hear a motion?
Make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Beth, roll call, please.
Councilmembers Boyle,
Yes.
Polito,
Yes.
Sazanaw,
Yes.
Weeks,
Yes.
Chairman Henry.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Good luck. Okay. All right, that completes our unfinished business for the evening.
It's up to Beth.
Oh,
So the exhibits?
I want the exhibit.
Yes. Okay.
At this time, we'll open it to the public for any public comments they want to make. Please come forward.
Judy Lipchak, 47 Kyle Drive. Tonight I find myself speechless as I stand before you. I was not present at last month's planning board meeting, but I was completely disgusted to hear this board voted unanimously to give the green light for the warehouse to be built on the mall property and the beautiful farm behind it, which allows the continued destruction of farmland and overdevelopment of warehouses in this town. Please spare me the excuses because there are none. There are no justifications. You have earned an Oscar for your performance as you denied any knowledge of Lopatcong's plans to build warehouses and that you did not work with them on the redevelopment plans. I have seen our plans and it's pretty ironic how they are exactly alike. Some of you stated that a warehouse cannot be built on the mall, just a parking lot. Kudos for your smoke and mirrors tricks. Misleading games started with the passing of truck parking and warehouse ordinances, especially when there's a lack of enforcement and giving a green light for continued warehouse development goes against your own ordinances. More smoke and mirrors, no justifications. It's a land grab when you hide behind deeming an area in need of redevelopment, then turn around and allow a warehouse to be built on it. This board and the council's lack of ability to see beyond warehouses is irresponsible, to say the least. Shame on you for what you are doing. Your legacy, for sure, will be memorable. To illustrate a real-world example of a town that takes its overdevelopment seriously and does its due diligence in helping to curb warehouse destruction. From Hillsborough Township committee member on October 25th, 2022, Committeeman Robert Brading provided residents with an update on the warehouse issues in Hillsborough. Imagine that, an update to the community on an issue that residents have spoken out about. Township engineers conducting a study on existing infrastructure, speed, turn geometrics, and weight restrictions. It also looked at other modes of transportation, such as walking and biking, to make sure they are taken into account, along with identifying sensitive areas such as schools, daycare centers, recreational parks, and places of worship, to name a few. And they will share those results with the public. Imagine that, openly sharing results. In terms of location, scale, and architectural standards, the New Jersey Planning Commission, Office of Planning Advocacy, recently adopted distribution, warehousing, and goods movement guidelines. Something I've personally asked this board and our council about. Y'all shrugged. Sad. Hillsborough Township will use this guidance to re-examine the definition of what a warehouse is. Zoning districts will be appropriately scaled to match the type of intensity of land use and surrounding areas to minimize and avoid on and off-site impacts. Wow. Kudos to them. The planning department was asked to look deeper into recent guidance to provide an analysis. They will look at supporting green initiatives as well. Amazing. In closing, he states that in order to protect his community, they will need a proactive and comprehensive approach to their land use master plan, zoning, and project review procedures based on sound planning practices, and will continue to update their community as more and new information is available. Wow, what an outstanding practice they have. Amazing how a competent and well-functioning community of leaders can help to protect and enhance a community instead of working in secrecy to destroy one. I continue to be stunned by the haphazard decisions by this board and council. I've heard many attempted justifications, some at the table and others while being approached in the parking lot. For example, this is for the kids, and housing prices are too high for people, so we need something to keep them reasonable. Really? Did I understand that to mean we want warehouses so that we can bring down our property values? I can't imagine anyone who would be happy with lower property values. So again, I'm just dumbfounded to imagine such false justifications. What or whoever is holding your puppet strings, I hope that you as a board and the council can cut them quickly so they can see clearly and protect this community before there's carnage on your hands. Thank you.
Tyler?
Donna Schneider, 26 Meadowview. I've asked the board, and I know I've asked council about Berry Plastics and what's going on at Berry Plastics and the huge amount of trucks going in and out of there. There's goods inside that I see when the doors are open. They're not a warehouse, and they're acting as a warehouse. And I mean, there has to be 50, 60, 70 trucks a day going back and forth on Strikers Road. And no one seems to be able to give me an answer on what is going on at Berry Plastics.
Well, I have no idea what's going on. It's not this board's prerogative to get into the business operations of Berry Plastics.
I'm trying to figure out who do I go to because everyone keeps saying it's somebody else or they're not sure. Does anybody here know who?
Only,
Okay, so when I did, he just wanted to know why I was asking and I told him and he never responded.
who's that?
Our zoning officer.
Andrew?
Yes. I said, I asked him the question, he said, and you are? That was all he sent me back in an email. And you are? I said, I'm a resident. And he never responded back.
Well, I understand that Berry Plastics is operating until possibly June of next year. And there was a gentleman that came in and said that they were going to be looking at leasing that property to grow strawberries inside horizontally.
Okay.
That's all I know.
So Berry they closed down and then they reopened?
I don't know. It
So-
was this gentleman making an inquiry.
Okay.
Berry doesn't own that property.
Right.
They never did. It was owned by an outfit called Stag Real Estate Investment Trusts.
Right, which is why we needed the conflict engineer because Stag owns.
Exactly.
Falls.
Colliers took over.
Okay.
That was Mr. Wisniewski's
Yes,
new employer, shall we say.
correct.
Anyway, I have no idea what their business plan is or what's going on. That portion of Berry that came in was always intended to be a warehouse, whether it was for their output from their manufacturing for it or they used to funnel goods through it. I have no idea. It's not the business of this board to really get into that.
Okay.
So that's about where we're at. I am as amazed as you are. And we refer to as Berry because that was the sign that was on the front.
Sure.
The ownerships that were involved in this, I still don't know where they all lie, come together, or whatever's happening here. So I really don't know if this board's able to even give you answers on this type of stuff.
Okay.
So that's the extent of my knowledge that's here. Maybe Ann has
Well-
more information, but
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to understand this. So if Stag owns the property,
well, I don't think they own it anymore. I'm not sure.
well, we don't know if NFI owns the property or some, whatever, LLC owns it, whatever that is.
According to our tax people, they don't own it anymore, so.
They don't own it anymore. So somebody owns it and somebody just decided to pick up and start another business there. And the township has no say in that?
Only if they were going to be changing the use there, that would go outside of what they're permitted to do in the zone now. It probably would be grandfathered anyway, because of the fact they've been conducting that type of business. They manufactured something there and they warehoused this product there, so.
Well, that's different between a warehousing their own product and a distribution center. I mean, those are two different animals.
Well, I don't know where they were distributing it to, but again.
Yeah, but it was their own
Not-
product. It's not,
Well, I'm not sure
yeah.
about that either, because they are, a multinational company, and I saw
Okay.
stuff coming in and I saw stuff coming out, so.
Well, yeah, it would just, for somebody to explain it to me and why it's allowed, and if it's legal, then fine. If it's not, then I'd like to know why it's continuing, so that, I guess I don't know who to turn to.
It would be the zoning officer, not this board.
And when I don't get an answer from the zoning board, it's at council? Okay, so I go right to council to get that information. Okay, to let them know that Andrew is not responding to residents, and not in a nice way either. So, yeah, it's kind of rude that he says that to a resident who's asking about a business, you know. Also, based on Bridge's approval tonight, and that there will be warehouse number 2 going on Strikers Road, anyone involved in anything having to do with the mall, the field behind the mall, I really hope somebody takes this into consideration when you're approving, giving blessings and everything else for this town to go ahead and put more warehouses on those properties. I hope you give it a second thought, because it's not going to be pretty. It's already not pretty on Strikers Road. It's going to be equally as not when NFI Susan wins, because now we're allowing more warehouses. It's going to be a disaster. So I really hope that this gets taken into account before anyone says yes to a warehouse. There's still time to change that plan.
Let me just clarify something here.
I know you just give the blessing.
No, it's not that.
We don't give a blessing.
We just say it's consistent or inconsistent with the master plan.
We don't control zoning. This board has nothing to do with zoning. That is strictly up to the council or the redevelopment authority from the council.
Okay.
No decisions, as I know of, have been made on the mall property of what's going to go there, what's not going to go. The only thing we authorized was to do a study on a redevelopment. We sent that back up to town council with our recommendation. As far as I know, it's all sitting still right there.
Right. So, so the master plan, you put ordinances in place to ban warehouses.
Which was inconsistent with the master plan.
That's inconsistent with the master plan.
This board has a very circumscribed jurisdiction, which nobody seems to appreciate.
I'm trying to figure that
Nobody seems
out.
to appreciate what this board has done. So people on a township council are able to enact zoning ordinances that get referred back here for a very judicial look to see whether or not it's consistent with the master plan.
Mhm.
This board said that that warehouse ban was inconsistent with the master plan.
Okay.
It is.
Okay.
So when it comes to a redevelopment plan, the only thing that this board has to do is determine whether it's an area in need of redevelopment after a hearing, which it did. It's out of the board's hands.
Okay.
What goes on there? We don't zone. We don't have any of the power. The only thing that we do here is to say whether or not it's consistent or inconsistent with the master plan.
Okay.
Period.
Thank you, because it's never clear. So, and then when you ask questions, it's never not saying you, but when you ask questions, they're vague. The answers are kind of vague a lot of times, and
I think I'm not being vague. I think I'm being very
I
direct.
said not you. I said not you. You've been very direct, so thank you, Jim. I appreciate the directness, to know who you need to talk to and who you need to speak with when you have an issue of a sort. So thank you, I appreciate it.
And one other thing, Donna, is we don't meet in secret. We don't have executive sessions. The only time that we met without full public participation in one of our meetings comes out when it's a personnel issue or a lawsuit that came against us.
Sure.
And I think you're all aware of the lawsuits that came against this board
Of course.
of how we are proceeding.
Yep.
We don't need to get together outside.
I've always instituted a policy.
There's always a meeting afterwards at the diner before it burned down, so yes, people do get together. So you can't say that.
As friends.
Yes.
We make it a policy that we do not discuss current or in progress applications.
Okay, that's good to know.
Times that I've been there with, he's no longer with us, Joe Pyre, he's a very good friend of mine. And we cut it at any point where we would be discussing stuff out in public. Like
Sure.
that. I think that, if I was out there and Joe and I are discussing things, there's a lot of people in that diner can listen to what our conversation is. And they'll never get anything from us commenting on what we're going to do.
I didn't accuse you of going in secret, so.
I understand that, but that seems to be a perception here that we meet in secret on the outside and take care of all this business. Everything we discuss about an application is right in this room in a public meeting.
Yep.
And I was
Good to know.
kind of proud of that, but apparently the message never gets out, so.
Well, I just, like I said, I'm just trying to figure out who to talk to. So I come up here and I ask the questions and just hope that somebody gives me a direct answer, Jim, so that I can go to the right place. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, hearing none and seeing none, I'll close the public portion, and we shall entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I hear no motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes. Any noes? Any abstentions?
I'll say that.
Okay.